And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently. Don't
miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Good morning. This is To The Point on GB News with me, Mercy Moroki, and Bev Turner. We're on your TV, radio and online.
Now, Wednesday is usually our viewer-led show, but bombshell resignations yesterday by the Chancellor and the Health Secretary have added to the Prime Minister's woes. So we're going to be with you until midday to give you all the latest updates on what is set to be a huge day in Westminster.
Yes, it is. But don't worry, because your views are still front and centre on our show. So get them in at gbnews at gbviews.uk, gbviews at gbnews.uk, and we'll be getting to those throughout the show. But first, here's the latest headlines with Rosie.
It is 10 o'clock. A very good morning to you. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date today on GB News. There have been further resignations from Boris Johnson's government this morning after two senior cabinet members quit last night. A number of ministers have left their jobs this morning, including the Schools Minister, Robin Walker, in the last few minutes, and the Children's Minister, Will Quince. Last night, Mr Johnson quickly appointed Nadhim Zahawi as Chancellor and Steve Barclay as Health Secretary to replace both Rishi Sunak and Sajid Javid after they resigned within minutes of each other. Speaking this morning, Mr Zahawi, the new Chancellor, said he believes the Prime Minister has integrity. The Labour MP, Steve Reid, told GB News the country deserves better.
They're too focused on covering up for Boris Johnson's lies and law-breaking to deal with the things that matter to the British people. And that is why we're saying this country desperately needs new leadership. And the rumours at Westminster, circulating in the Tory end of the tea rooms, is that the Prime Minister, to save his own skin, if he feels he's going to be deposed, may call the snap general election. Well, that will then put the ball in the court of the British people.
Well, today there have been further calls for the Prime Minister to resign, with some Conservative MPs saying it's a matter of when, not if, Mr Johnson is forced out of number 10. Writing in The Telegraph, the former Brexit Minister Lord Frost called on him to quit before he takes the Conservative Party and the government down with him. Meanwhile, Alex Chalk, who resigned as Solicitor General last night, said the government's duty cannot extend to defending the indefensible. But Lord Moylan, a former advisor to Mr Johnson, says the Prime Minister's in a better position than he was yesterday.
There's no sense at all in Boris actually voluntarily resigning. And actually, I think the Cabinet is stronger this morning than it was yesterday morning, because we've seen two politicians go who basically at the end of their political lives. I mean, they don't really have a future. Rishi could have, but he doesn't really want it, I think.
In some other news now, more than 2 million low-income workers will benefit from changes to national insurance, which comes into effect today. The threshold's been raised, so workers can now earn up to £12,500 before contributing. It's up from the previous threshold of £10,000. Well, the move follows an increase in national insurance earlier this year, which the government says will help pay for health and social care. People claiming disability benefits are waiting, on average, 5 months to receive their first payment. The Institute for Fiscal Studies says this likely contributes to the link between disability and deprivation, with disabled people making up to 44% of the most deprived working-age adults in the UK. Well, the government says payments are backdated and waiting times have been cut by 6 weeks compared to this time a year ago. In the US now, and Robert Crimo, the 21-year-old suspect in Chicago's Independence Day parade shooting, is going to appear in court today. He's been charged with 7 counts of murder and is suspected of shooting victims from a rooftop above the parade on the 4th of July. 46 other people were hurt. He allegedly dressed up as a woman to try to blend into those fleeing the danger. If convicted, he'll face a life sentence without the possibility of parole. Well, Vice President Kamala Harris visited the scene of the shooting and said it should never have happened.
We got to be smarter as a country in terms of who has access to what, and in particular assault weapons. And we got to take this stuff seriously as you are, because you have been forced to have to take it seriously. The whole nation should understand and have a level of empathy to understand that this can happen anywhere, in any peace-loving community.
In Australia, there's been continued torrential rain and flooding in Sydney. More than 85,000 people in the area have been told to or to prepare to evacuate their homes. After 4 days of floods, well, the centre of the storm has moved away from the heart of the city, but the rivers remain above danger levels. Emergency worker Colin Britton said it was heartbreaking.
Obviously, there's a bit of despair with some people, and a lot of people have only just gone through the whole process of getting their places cleaned up, getting all the renovations and things fixed up and replaced from the previous floods earlier this year. So having one so soon again is a bit heartbreaking, because this is going to be the 3rd big clean-up they've had to do in 2 years.
Petrol prices in the UK have hit another record high. The RAC says the average cost of a litre of fuel rose by more than 16 pence in June to over 191 pence. That's the highest monthly increase since records began. It now costs more than £105 to fill an average family car. This is GB News. I'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's head back to the point.
Good morning. This is To The Point on GB News with me, Mercy Moroki, and Bev Turner on your TV, radio and online. It's a big day for the Prime Minister, and here's what's coming up.
Now, unless you've been asleep since about 5 o'clock yesterday, Health Secretary Sajid Javid and the Chancellor Rishi Sunak resigned, with the Prime Minister promptly appointing replacements. We're going to be giving you the latest from Westminster all morning on what is set to be one of the Prime Minister's toughest, but for us, most interesting days.
Yes, indeed. And we'll be speaking to members of Parliament from the 3 main parties all morning to discuss the Prime Minister's position, what this means for the opposition and the future of the country.
And as it's a Wednesday, you, of course, play a big part in today's show. We're going to be getting your views as we go, and we'll be speaking live to a viewer and a listener at the end of the show. They're not in that house that you're looking at, though, unless we get very lucky.
Probably do a better job, maybe. Who knows? Get your views in, gbviews@gbnews.uk. What do you make of yesterday's events? Are you pleased to see the Chancellor and the Health Secretary go? What do you think it means for Boris? Let us know.
Now, of course, last night, Prime Minister Boris Johnson lost 2 of his senior cabinet members within 10 minutes of each other, as both Chancellor Rishi Sunak and Health Secretary Sajid Javid handed in their resignations.
Yes, well, both ministers cited a lack of leadership from the Prime Minister as reasons for resigning, with Rishi Sunak, the Chancellor, saying that the public had expected government to be conducted, quote, properly, competently and seriously, and Sajid Javid inferring that under Boris's leadership, the Conservative Party became neither strong nor principled.
Their resignations come after the Prime Minister was forced to admit that he was aware of sexual harassment complaints lodged against his former Deputy Chief Whip, Chris Pincher, who resigned on Thursday after groping 2 men whilst intoxicated at a London club. Now, complaints that the PM previously said, of course, that he didn't know about.
It was something that was only raised with me very cursorily, but I wish that we had, I in particular, had acted on it, and that he had not continued in government, because he then went on, I'm afraid, to behave, as far as we can see, according to the allegations that we have, very, very badly.
I'm conscious our time is limited.
I'm sorry for those who've been badly affected by it.
While several junior ministers and government aides also resigned last night, and more have stepped down this morning. But Boris Johnson appears to be hanging on, swiftly appointing Nadhim Zahawi to Chancellor, who was, of course, previously Education Secretary, and Steve Barclay has been promoted to Health Secretary. He was formerly, of course, the Prime Minister's Chief of Staff. And Michelle Donnellan is now the Education Secretary. She was formerly Universities Minister.
So joining us from outside Downing Street to give us the latest is our political correspondent, Tom Harwood. Tom, good morning. Have there been any more resignations this morning?
Well, there have been a number of junior ministers and some PPSs, so that's the sort of the bottom rung of the ministerial ladder, if you will, not quite senior enough to be a minister. I'm just going to pause you there because I believe that's right. That's Defence Secretary Ben Wallace just walking outside Downing Street now. Ben Wallace, what did you say to the Prime Minister? Does the Prime Minister have your confidence? Well, predictably there, the Defence Secretary not answering the multiple shouts that we in the press pen have been yelling all morning. But no, Defence Secretary, as far as we know, still in post there. Indeed, last night, most of, if not all of the Cabinet issued statements saying that they will remain in their job. I don't think we're expecting any cabinet resignations today, but it's that junior ministerial rung. People like Will Quince, who resigned this morning. He, of course, went out on that broadcast round on Monday defending the Prime Minister, saying the Prime Minister did not know of any specific allegations against Chris Pincher, a line that turned out to be untrue, arguably. Well, he's resigned this morning. Someone else on resignation watch is Penny Mordaunt. She's currently a trade minister, has in the past been Defence Secretary herself, tipped by many to be a leadership contender. Well, could she resign before PMQs today? That would make quite a splash, and that's certainly something being looked out for as well. But yes, currently the picture looks like no big cabinet resignations expected, perhaps more trickling of junior ministers. And then, of course, at midday, the Prime Minister stands up at the dispatch box of the House of Commons. To what extent will the MPs behind him be cheering, or will they be as frosty as those sitting opposite?
OK, thank you, Tom. Thank you very much. Go and get a glass of water. It sounds like you did your throat a little bit of damage then, shouting. And listen, we love you being down there, Tom, today. Make sure you let us know, won't you? If anything happens, we will come straight back to you. Now, with us...
I believe before you do that, Robert Halfon, who is, I believe, chair of the Education Select Committee, has released quite a damning statement against the Prime Minister, we're being told, and I think we actually have that on the screen. He says, I was previously against any leadership change. He's naturally a Conservative. He can't bring himself to do this again, giving the Prime Minister the benefit of the doubt he's referring to. He says there's been a real loss of integrity, but also a failure of policy. We will look in more detail at that letter from Robert Halfon very shortly.
Thank you, Mercy. Now, with us in the studio is Lord Marland, who ran Boris's mayoral campaign in 2008 and has served as the Prime Minister's trade envoy under David Cameron. Good morning, Jonathan. Lovely to see you. How will Boris Johnson be feeling this morning? We've seen Tom there outside the window. We shouldn't expect him to open the curtains and wave, I shouldn't imagine.
I would have thought he's thinking, God, what a job being Prime Minister. Yeah. It's never stops, does it? I mean, it's sort of a constant stream of attack on him.
Well, you're one of the reasons he's there. You played a huge part in putting Boris Johnson into number 10. A lot of people would like to...
Very kind of you to say so, but I did get involved in running his mayoral campaign, which, if you like, gave him a launch pad for it. And I know him quite well, and I saw him a couple of times last week, which is always a pleasure. It is a very tough job being Prime Minister. It's crisis management, one crisis to another. I'm amazed at his resilience and his cheerfulness.
Now, you may see resilience. Some people would say it's sheer bloody-mindedness and stubbornness, and that he doesn't know when the time is right to go. Is that time today? I
think two things. Firstly, you need to be resilient and bloody-minded as a Prime Minister. He's certainly not the first. The second thing, he recognises, as if we all reflect, that no Prime Minister is ever popular when they're in power. You go back, Tony Blair, Gordon Brown, Theresa May, David Cameron, none of them were ever popular when they were in power.
they're always being attacked by their own parties.
But he's the dartboard.
It's never the party opposite. It's always their own parties that criticise them the most. And it seems to be quite relentless at the moment.
Yeah, can I just ask, we've got these elections for the backbench committee of the Conservative Party coming up, the 1922 committee, and, there's been rumours, they're going to elect people who are essentially anti-Boris so they can change the rules so that they can hold that confidence vote again before the year has passed. Isn't it the case that if he doesn't resign, which, let's be honest, he's not going to resign, he will be pushed out in a few weeks?
Well, I don't know that he's not going to resign. I don't think either of us, Mercy, can predict that he is or isn't. The fact is, this is a terrible display of Conservative loyalty, the whole thing. You see people writing letters, coming out, noises off, sounding out for their own position. And I always find this terribly bad. And what they don't understand is it's actually doing a great disservice to the Conservative Party. It's playing straight into the opposition hands. And I've always felt it's much better to say what you've got to say behind closed doors rather than doing a press release to the public.
So why have they done that? Because I don't for 1 minute believe this has got anything to do with Chris Pincher and the sexual harassment allegations.
Well, I think...
If they'd wanted a reason to go on sleaze, they've had many more opportunities up until now, Sunak and Sajid Javid. So what's really going on, Jonathan?
Well, I think if you take the two individuals... It's a well-known fact that Boris and Rishi were locked in debate, or even worse probably, about tax and the future of tax. It's clear the Treasury and Rishi Sunak want to increase taxes. Boris realises, and most people in business and everyone wants to see reduced taxes. And so there was a conflict going on over this particular issue. Boris wants to see tax reductions. Everyone wants to see tax reductions. Business wants to see tax reductions. In order for us to have a post-Brexit dividend, we have to show that we're more tax-friendly than our competitors, being Europe and America. So I think there was... Sorry, just to finish on your main point, I think there is a question was, did he jump before he was pushed?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, look, you're going to be joining us, Lord Marland, throughout the next hour, so we will return to you. But we've got another special guest. Of course, Boris Johnson won that huge majority, didn't he, in the 2019 elections. 80-seat majority, in fact, but successive opinion polls put Labour in the lead at the moment, and a new YouGov poll now finds that a majority of Conservative voters want the Prime Minister to resign.
So are the resignations of Sunak and Javid what will be prove fatal for the Prime Minister? Is he able to turn things around for the Conservatives like he did before 2019? So joining us now to discuss this in more detail is the polling expert, Sir John Curtis, Professor of Politics at the University of Strathclyde. Thank you so much for joining us, Sir John. Can the Prime Minister turn this around based on the figures that you've seen today?
Well, there's certainly no doubt that the figures in the YouGov poll will worry the Prime Minister to some degree, because although the polls ever since Partygate first broke in the news have been showing around 2/3 of people saying that the Prime Minister should resign, the proportion of those who voted Conservative in 2019 who said he should do so has been running roughly between a quarter and a third. Today's poll shows a majority of those who voted for him in 2019 now saying he should go. But I think the honest truth is the action now is not really in the public and the public's reaction. We know the public's reaction to this story because it's all of a piece with its adverse reaction to Partygate. What we're now looking at is whether or not the foundations upon which the Prime Minister's authority ultimately rests, that is retaining the support of his backbenchers, whether or not that is now being fatally eroded. You've just shown Robert Halpern, a prominent backbencher, now saying he is against the Prime Minister staying. We've had a number of Tory backbenchers who clearly voted for the Prime Minister just a month ago to remain as their leader, now saying that they have changed their mind. And so the question now is, because the Prime Minister isn't going to resign, the public doesn't think the Prime Minister is going to resign. The question is whether or not he's going to be forced out. And the most likely way in which he's going to be forced out is A, that the 1922 committee elections does produce a majority of people who think that the rules should be changed, that the rules are changed, and that perhaps we don't know, but perhaps now it is the case that a majority of Conservative MPs think he should go, much as apparently seems to be the case according to YouGov, a majority of 2019 Conservative voters now also think he should go.
And I wonder if, because a lot of MPs in Parliament right now, many of whom owe their seats to Boris Johnson, many of the Red Wall MPs, they might be thinking, look, if we get rid of Boris Johnson, I'm not sure anybody else is a vote winner at the moment. What are you seeing in terms of the feeling of constituents in the Red Wall? Could they be pressuring their MPs to get rid of Boris Johnson, or actually do they quite like him?
Well, the truth is that the bit of the Conservative coalition of 2019 that has always looked the more fragile, and certainly is the element amongst which support for the Conservatives has fallen most heavily over the course of the last 6 months, is those who voted Leave. We're now in a situation whereas back in December 2019, 3/4 of those people who voted Leave voted for the Conservatives. That figure is now not much more than 50%. The truth is that, because a prime minister was popular with a group of voters at one point in time, is no guarantee that they will be in future. And I think, one should just remember what happened the last time we had a Conservative government in serious electoral trouble, yet having been led by somebody who at the previous election had pulled off a surprising and well-credited victory. So John Major in 1992 pulled off an unexpected victory, got a lot of credit for it, but that didn't mean to say he could save MP seats in 1997. So the question that MPs have to ask themselves is not how well Boris Johnson did in 2019, but how well might he do in future? And probably the central question there is that, for the last 6 months or so, around 3/4 of people have said, including around a half of Conservative voters, have been saying, frankly, we don't think the Prime Minister's been telling the truth over Partygate. It is, of course, that allegation that's given legs to this Chris Pincher story. And again, apparently the Prime Minister not seemingly being fully upfront about the circumstances behind Mr. Pincher's appointment. And if voters don't believe the Prime Minister on an issue like Partygate, will they believe him in future on taxation, on the cost of living, on Ukraine, etc.? Now, maybe Mr. Johnson could turn it around, but that certainly is the challenge that faces him. And it is the judgment call that Tory MPs have to make.
Okay, thank you so much, Sir John Curtis there, Professor of Politics at the University of Strathclyde. What do you make of that, Lord Marland?
Well, he's brilliant, isn't he? And so concise in what he says. And, he's on the money. There's no question we're in midterm. Midterm is a very bad period. Amazingly, that Boris finds himself only 10, 12% behind in the polls. Blair was 20%. Around Iraq and still went on to win. Thatcher was 20% round minus in the polls around Falklands. And 10, 12% is nothing in midterm. So I think if you look in that and you recognise it's midterm, it's an opportunity. But the issue here is, have we got a government that is actually delivering? And if you look at some of the issues and problems, he is being let down, and the government is being let down by the civil service. You look at passports, as Robert Halfon correctly refers to in his letter. The FCA, the Financial Conduct Authority, have just said it's going to take us 8 weeks to appoint a case officer to even look at a takeover or an acquisition. We have, as you know, DVLA. All these people are not getting back to work, and this is causing the government real problems in terms of action. Sorry, Mercy.
Well, Robert Halfon has said in that letter, much policy delivery is a mirage. So that is his opinion there. He says he will vote for a change in leadership if that time, when that time comes, really. So that's Robert Halfon, the Education Select Committee Chair's views. But stay with us for more of the latest news, comment and reaction from Westminster. Will Prime Minister Boris Johnson survive this round of resignations? Well, we'll talk about that after this break.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Good morning, it is 10:25. This is To The Point with Bev Turner and Mercy Muroki on GB News. We are live on your TV, online and radio this morning.
Yes, well, our top story of this morning is, of course, Boris Johnson's future, because it looks to be under threat, as last night Chancellor Rishi Sunak and Health Secretary Sajid Javid both resigned within 10 minutes of each other. Steve Barclay, who was previously Chief of Staff, was appointed Health Secretary, and Nadhim Zahawi, previously Education Secretary, is now the Chancellor of the Exchequer. This morning, Junior Ministers Laura Trott and Will Quince both resigned as well.
Many are speculating, of course, including us, is this the end of the road for Boris Johnson? And our reporter, Alice Porter, is in Uxbridge, the Prime Minister's constituency, a seat he holds with a majority of 7,210. Alice, thank you so much for joining us. What do residents there make of these resignations?
Good morning. Well, I have been to Uxbridge and Ryslip a number of times over the last few months. I was here when there was a vote of no confidence in the PM, when there was various issues with Partygate. And every time I came here, I did get a general sense of feeling that people still supported the Prime Minister. They might have been quite weary with his antics, but there generally was still quite a strong feeling. But I have to say, I think that is changing. I've been out and about speaking with people this morning, and I think there's a lot of people who perhaps are loyal still to the Conservatives. And remember, this is a very safe Tory seat ever since it was created in 2010. But just because you're loyal to the Conservatives, it doesn't mean you're necessarily loyal to the Prime Minister. And with such a big players yesterday, with Rishi Sunak and Sajid Javid resigning yesterday, it could mean that people in Uxbridge and Ryslip may also want to change their votes when it comes to the ballot box in 2 years' time. I was out and about speaking with some people this morning to see whether they think the Prime Minister should stay, and this is what they said to me.
Some people still like him, which I get, but then I think for me, I won't be voting for him. No, I do think that he needs to be held accountable for what he's done, the actions he took, and I think we need a new leader.
Well, I think he should stay because he's done a terrific job. You know, getting us Brexit through COVID. Just because he's had a few mess-ups, we all do.
I would say he should go.
And why do you think he should go?
Because lots of wrong things happened during the pandemic, and lots of people suffered where they enjoyed their parties at home, which was not fair on others, where they restricted rules on others, and to be honest, that was not fair.
I think enough has been enough. You know, you can't excuse some of the stuff that's happened, sexual assault in particular.
So I think the time's to go. You can't defend the indefensible.
Some of Boris Johnson's constituency there. Now, I think it's worth pointing out that even if Boris Johnson does survive a very topsy-turvy few days ahead, he would still remain as the MP for Uxbridge and Ruislip, even if he was no longer the Prime Minister. But the question is, with the general election in 2 years' time, it really matters what the people in Uxbridge and Ruislip think, because they may not vote for him in 2 years' time.
OK, thank you, Alice, very much there down in Uxbridge. Joining us now is Christine Jardine, MP, Liberal Democrat Treasury spokesperson. Christine, thank you so much for joining us. I'm sure you're watching the Tories implode this morning, aren't you? What is your personal take on events?
My personal take on events is that it's ridiculous it's taken so long. We have a Prime Minister who isn't fit for office. I have seen Conservative grandees, Conservative former ministers agree with that statement. There is a general acceptance that Boris Johnson has let down his party, the people who voted for him, and the country, and it's been just one shambles after another, and it really is time to go. And what we're seeing at Westminster, what we were seeing last night certainly, was, you know, groups of Conservative MPs standing around in huddles, sitting around talking about it, and a kind of resignation that, you know, this was the end of it. It had to stop.
That is true, but it is still the case that Boris Johnson was incredibly popular, and he did win a massive majority, that 80-seat majority. And meanwhile, as it currently stands, I believe that Lib Dems have 14 MPs in Parliament. I mean, it's not like Lib Dems' message is necessarily resonating with people.
Well, you know, I think you're misreading the situation completely there. There have been 3 by-elections which we have stood in against the Conservatives, and each time overturned massive majorities because people may have thought that Boris Johnson was going to be a good Prime Minister for them, but they have felt let down by him and a government which is out of touch. Our message is resonating with people across the country now because they see that what they have in Boris Johnson is a Prime Minister who's not fit to govern and a government which is completely out of touch with the issues that they are facing through the cost of living crisis, the inflation, which is getting quite scary, the rate it's getting to. And the key word that you used there was, that was the key word, he was popular. He's not now. People now are saying to us on the doors, you know, I'm never voting Conservative again, or I'm never voting as long as Boris Johnson's there. And I would appeal to the remaining cabinet ministers today, people like Dominic Raab and Therese Coffey, to, you know, examine what has happened and think, you know, do you really want this man still in charge of the government? You know, it's taken Rishi Sunak and Sajid Javid a long time to come to their conclusions, but they have come to it. And we know that there are a significant number of Conservative MPs who agree with us and with them that he has to go, that the time has come for change. This Conservative government has let the country down. It let down the people who voted for it.
Yeah, Christine, it must be a bit of a dilemma, though, presumably, for anybody, for Labour and Liberal Democrats at the moment, because to some extent Boris Johnson has become... He's become the focus of all of the scandal recently. Whether you blame him or not, he is going to take the hit on this. And yesterday, with those 2 resignation letters, those 2 cabinet ministers basically gave the public another stick to beat Boris Johnson with. If he remains as leader of the Conservatives, is that not a good thing for the Liberal Democrats? Shouldn't you be sitting there today and saying, just keep him where he is and just sit tight until the next election?
Absolutely not. What is important is what is best for the country. And, you know, I'm appalled by the suggestion that I would want a bad Prime Minister to stay in place because it might be good for my party's ratings. No. What we want is a government which is in touch with what the people of this country need, which is listening to the people of this country and then reacting and doing what we need to get out of these crises that we've had one after the other for the past 3 years, and all have been mismanaged. You can go right back to the PPE contracts. In fact, you can go back before that. This country did not get the Brexit that Boris Johnson promised them. And we now have the problems with the Northern Ireland Protocol because of that. We had the PPE contracts, which were a disaster. We've we've had the mismanagement of the cost of living crisis.
I do think if we list all of those, we might be here a very long time. Some of the scandals are coming. But thank you, Christine Jardine, for joining us this morning. Thank you for your time. Well, will Prime Minister Boris Johnson survive? That's the question we're asking, and we'll be getting your reaction and analysis across the political spectrum very shortly. But don't go away. Here's the latest headlines.
Good morning, it's 10:34. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date on GB News. There have been further resignations from Boris Johnson's government this morning after 2 senior cabinet members quit last night. A number of ministers have left their jobs today, including Schools Minister Robin Walker and Children's Minister Will Quince. Last night, Mr Johnson quickly appointed Nadhim Zahawi as Chancellor and Steve Barclay as Health Secretary to replace both Rishi Sunak and Sajid Javid after they quit within minutes of each other. Speaking this morning, Mr Zahawi, the new Chancellor, said he believes the Prime Minister has integrity. Labour MP Steve Reid told GB News the country deserves better.
They're too focused on covering up for Boris Johnson's lies and law-breaking to deal with the things that matter to the British people. And that is why we're saying this country desperately needs new leadership. But the rumours at Westminster, circulating in the Tory end of the tea rooms, is that the Prime Minister, to save his own skin, if he feels he's going to be deposed, may call the snap general election. Well, that will then put the ball in the court of the British people.
There have been further calls today from within the Conservatives for the Prime Minister to resign. Writing in The Telegraph, the former Brexit Minister Lord Frost called on him to quit before he takes the Conservative Party and the government down with him. A number of other MPs, including Robert Halfron and Lee Anderson, publicly withdrew their support this morning. But Lord Moylan, a former advisor to Mr Johnson, says the Prime Minister is in a better position than yesterday.
There's no sense at all in Boris actually voluntarily resigning. And actually, I think the Cabinet is stronger this morning than it was yesterday morning, because we've seen 2 politicians go who basically at the end of their political lives. I mean, they don't really have a future. Rishi could have, but he doesn't really want it, I think.
Some other news now. A joint police operation across 5 countries has smashed an organised crime network accused of smuggling up to 10,000 people into the UK on small boats. Around 40 people were arrested in coordinated raids in the UK, Belgium, Germany, France and the Netherlands, including 6 people in London. 135 small boats and more than 1,200 life jackets were also recovered in Germany and the Netherlands. TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.195 and 1.167 euros. The price of gold currently stands at £1,476 and 75 pence per ounce.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News, investments that matter.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory,
twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Good morning. It is 10:40 a.m. This is To The Point with Bev Turner and Mercy Muroki on GB News. We are live, of course, on your TV, online and radio this morning.
Yes, now, as we've been discussing all morning, the Prime Minister, Boris Johnson's future is under serious threat. He's been rocked by more resignations this morning. This includes Laura Trott, who's a junior Transport Minister, and Will Quinns, who's Minister for Children and Families.
So we're trying to work out how fatal is all of this for the Prime Minister and what are the opposition up to. So joining us now to give us some more detail and possibly a bit of gossip is Kevin Maguire, Associate Editor of the Daily Mirror. Good morning, Kevin.
Morning.
Good morning. Can you hear us all right now? Are the Labour Party ready to fight any potential snap election, do you think? We're not there yet, are we?
No, we're not the snap election, but I think we're in the end game for Boris Johnson. I think his lies have finally caught up with him. He is a dead man lying. It's just a matter of time, whether it's weeks or months, he'll be gone, because so many of his own party recognise he'll take them down with him. So they hope to change at the top, and you can move on, because they're stuck with Boris Johnson. But if I was Keir Starmer, Ed Davey, the Liberal Democrat leader, Scotland, Nicola Sturgeon, I'd actually want Boris Johnson to carry on, because him going gives the Conservatives a chance of a fresh face and a new start. And he is the opposition's biggest electoral asset. Now, I think they're going to get the scalp. I think that will be it, because the Conservative Party's turned against him. But it'll be tougher for Labour, the Libs, SNP as a result.
And in terms of Keir Starmer's future, is it better for the Labour Party, as they potentially prepare to head into an election or face up to the Conservatives again, is it advantageous for Keir to be leading the Labour Party, or actually does the new face need to be the leader?
Yeah, possibly Labour could do better if they had somebody, like Lisa Nandy or Wes Streeting, Rachel Reeves, Lou Haig. You can make the case for that. But if Labour turns in on itself, that won't look good to the public when the Conservatives are tearing themselves apart over Boris Johnson. And look, if he's fined by Durham police for COVID-alleged breaches, then Starmer will be gone, but so will his deputy, Angela Rayner. There's no truth in these wild conspiracy theory rumours that there's somehow a super injunction. He's already been charged and fined. That's just not true. But I think Labour will stick with Keir Starmer until the election, and they can present him as a steady face. He's going to be better known than whoever replaces Boris Johnson. That'll give him a slight advantage. But he needs to do well today at Prime Minister's questions. There's an open goal for Keir Starmer, and if he doesn't put the ball in the back of the net, then he'll be in trouble. But as I say, it's this contradiction for the opposition parties. They want really Johnson to say whatever they say. And I was listening to Christina Jardine of the Lib Dems saying, "Oh look, we want better for the country." The truth in politics is, if the country's doing well, opposition parties don't do well. It's a truth they don't like to speak, but it's true, because people vote for change when people feel they're doing badly.
That's right, absolutely. When she said that, I did think, well, maybe that's why Liberal Democrats never actually get in, because you're not playing politics. You're just maybe being a bit too nice. But Kevin, lovely to see you. Thanks so much. We've still got Lord Marland in the studio. I'm dying to come to you. I want to hear your thoughts. Sunak now and Sajid Javid, what will they be doing today?
Well, I imagine they will be thinking about whether they're potential leadership candidates. They won't have resigned without sounding out a few people. In fact, I'm aware they've sounded out a few people. They may well combine forces and offer themselves up as leadership candidates. But Boris has got to either be got rid of or resign before they do that. So we're a while off. I thought Kevin's analysis was extremely good. In the end, people vote a government out rather than a government winning. And the likelihood scenario, as you see it at the moment, and I think Kevin alluded to that, is we will have a wonderful coalition of the SNP, the Liberals and Labour, because it's a very big majority to overturn, unless Starmer, which I don't think he will, because I don't think he's quite got the charisma, will create. And then we'll have a lot of fun, because I was in government with the Lib Dems. The public then really took their revenge on them and slaughtered them in the election, because they don't actually stand for anything. They stand for opposing. They're very good in opposition, but they don't actually stand for anything. And I think people will really fall out of love with the SNP.
Yeah, I wonder, you mentioned charisma there, and I think it's interesting because that's always a word that has long been associated with Boris Johnson, and many say that's how he's got to where he is at the moment. Do you think there's a chance that going into the next general election, people will be looking around and saying, actually, we just want policy. We don't need somebody who's charismatic and who's this bigger anymore.
Mercy, you're completely right. I mean, what Boris has to do, and what I said to him last week, is he has to come out with a vision for Britain in a post-Brexit, post-COVID era. Everyone is terribly worried about the future. You know, we can see the nation is sitting on its hands in terms of spending money because they're worried about inflation, the effect on their cost of living, etc. And so he has got to present a vision which people can buy into. Yes, we've got this inflation. It's a global problem. We've all got to be careful in the next period of time, but we are going to create a Britain where people want to come and invest in it, that has hope, and Boris is unbelievably good at that. And if he gets a bit of airtime where he can get away from all these constant problems he's having to deal with and lay out that vision, then I think people, the general public, will buy into it, because largely they like him. Yes, they're very disappointed, as we all are, about the Partygate and all these other scandals, but he has got unbelievable charisma and energy, and I've just been with him in Rwanda for the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting, and they love him.
I hate to interrupt you.
Sorry.
I don't think for a second that Sajid Javid or Rishi Sunak have got a chance in hell of ever becoming Prime Minister in this country. Nobody's going to vote them in. We don't trust either of them after the last 2 years. Do you genuinely think they've got the arrogance to think that they could be leader of the Conservative Party?
Well, there are very few MPs who don't think they can be Prime Minister. So
yeah, good point.
I couch it like that. I'm not going to get into personalities. I don't know Rishi Sunak. I know Sajid. I've always liked him.
It's not even personalities, it's behaviour. It's action. It's the lack of trust we have.
I much prefer things behind closed doors. If I've got something to say to Boris, which I have done, I've said it behind closed doors, and I think that's always the best way, because the public will see a divided party split down the middle, and they will reap the whirlwind of this, I'm afraid.
Well, we're glad you're here today to have a conversation that isn't behind closed doors anyway.
Lord Marland will join you again in a second. All of this morning, we've, of course, been giving you news, reaction and analysis of that big story of the day. And could the Prime Minister face his biggest leadership challenge, or his biggest challenge to his leadership yet? Well, joining us now to give us their thoughts and reaction to the fast-moving events in Westminster are Ben Habib, former Brexit Party MEP, and former editor of Labour List, Peter Edwards. Thank you both for joining. Ben, let's start with you. What have you made of what has happened over the last, 18 hours or whatever it's been now? Do you think the Prime Minister is now as good as gone?
Yeah, I think he is as good as gone. This is the end game. This is the very end game. And the question now for me isn't so much whether Boris Johnson's going to go. It's how tainted his fellow cabinet members are going to be for hanging around him. I was very disappointed to see Nadhim Zahawi taking the position of Chancellor of the Exchequer, putting his weight behind the Prime Minister when it's so obvious to every single person in the country now that the Prime Minister has an association with the truth that would make Pinocchio ashamed. How can anyone back this man? And the issue now is whether the Tory party makes itself unelectable because it disqualifies all its senior members from being able to lead it and therefore the country. The Tory party is back firmly in 1996, and if they're not careful at the next election, they're going to have 13 years or more in the wilderness. They need to get a grip. They need to get rid of Johnson. They need to find a capable leader, one who believes in traditional conservative values, small state, low taxation, deregulation, get Brexit properly done, not the half-baked nonsense that Boris Johnson's delivered, but get Brexit properly done and put the United Kingdom firmly on the international map.
There's a lot of people who feel like that, Ben, but who would you want to see make all of that happen and potentially go on to win the next election?
There are 350 plus Tory party MPs.
Two names even.
And well, it's very difficult because so many of them are in the shadows and have on the back benches. But I think the process should reveal a natural leader. I mean, lots of names come to mind, but I don't really know the policies and the way they think, in detail enough to be able to put them forward. But Esther McVey, I think, is first class. Penny Mordaunt might be first class. Even though people are critical, I know, Bev, you were just critical of Rishi Sunak and Sajid Javid. And for understandable reasons, I think Rishi Sunak has had a really bad time in the last 12 months as Chancellor of the Exchequer, entirely failing to prepare the country for unlocking, where we needed tax cuts, tax on the working classes and so on cut. But even Rishi would be a better Prime Minister than Boris Johnson right now.
Well, Ben, thank you for that. I just want to bring in Peter. Look, Peter, obviously, you're probably enjoying seeing the Tory party in chaos. You'd rather the Tory party than it be Labour. But where do you think this leaves Labour? Because let's be honest, Keir Starmer's position is not exactly guaranteed, is it? He's still waiting to see if he's been fined for that beer he had, well, God knows when it was, during the pandemic.
Well, that does feel like rather small beer compared to what we're talking about. But Kevin Maguire, your previous contributor, made a fair point that governments lose elections, but the opposition has to be fit enough to win them. Personally, I'm convinced Keir Starmer will be cleared, but he's thrown down the gauntlet to Durham Police. So until the matter of fine or no fine is resolved, there's a bit of a question mark hanging over him. I have no doubt he will be cleared. But then it goes to if the Conservatives change their leader, which I think it's only a matter of time, it may not happen this week, but it will happen, and Keir Starmer is renewed and refreshed as leader of the opposition, what is Labour's pitch? Because the Tories have been, up till now, effective at both throwing leaders overboard, whether it's Margaret Thatcher, Theresa May, David Cameron went immediately within hours of losing the referendum, and reinventing themselves, even if that involves pinching Labour policies, for example, like trying to increase the salaries of people on low pay. So there will be a bit of an existential policy question for Keir Starmer. And it goes back to the point I've always made, that for Labour, it can't be about one person. The Tories have shown how when it is all about one person, that can end very badly. So for Labour, it has to be a team effort with a strong shadow cabinet and the policies to back that up.
Well, Peter, thank you for that. Thank you both, Ben Habib, the former Brexit Party MEP and former editor of Labour List, Peter Edwards. Thank you both for joining us. Let's go to you, Lord Marland, again. What do you make of what's just been said there? We had some suggestions from Ben Habib there. Penny Mordaunt, for example, could make a good leader, he said. Esther McVey, he said as well.
Well, I've canvassed for Esther, and I know Penny quite well from old. Penny is quite well known, thought of being on manoeuvres, as they say. I'm not going to get into personalities, the next one, but what he really didn't have was a real strong name to put forward, as he admitted himself. And it's like a football manager. It's all very well getting rid of the manager, but who are you going to get replacement to rebuild the team? And Man United tried it on umpteen occasions, as Beverley will know, as like me from Manchester. And it's easier said than done. He was talking about a commitment to Brexit, a commitment to lower taxes. One of the reasons why Rishi is gone is because he was committed to not having lower taxes, despite Rishi, by the way, having a very, very good COVID, the furlough scheme, etc., which saved many union jobs.
And has now crippled the economy, though.
And would have been a Labour policy. And you hear the unions shouting from the rooftop that it was their idea. So it's interesting. I think the Conservative Party, my message is the Conservative Party have got to be careful what they wish for, and they've got to be very careful they're not divided, because they're walking the plank for not just losing their jobs, but losing being in government. And it is a fundamental issue, not being in government. You do not want to be in opposition.
Thank you, Lord Marland. Right, we're going to go back to Westminster, I think. We're going to discuss this further with Sammy Wilson, DUP MP and Chief Whip. Good morning, Sammy. Just your response to events of the last 18 hours, please.
Well, I think it's not good for the country to have the kind of instability which is now developing here at Westminster. We're in the middle of a cost of living crisis. We have got huge international problems which will affect Europe and the world for decades in the future if we don't get this right. And we're on the verge of moving into a recession because of all of the impacts of the Ukrainian situation, the supply side issues which have arisen from the pandemic and other economic problems. And really, I think what we need is stability, and not this self-indulgence of who should lead the Conservative Party and who should be Prime Minister. We've got a Prime Minister. He was elected. He was elected with a very strong majority. He's a flawed man. We know that in Northern Ireland. He has made promises which he didn't keep. But nevertheless, I think that if you look at the overall picture, the country cannot afford this indulgence at the moment.
So the way you see this is just about politicians ignoring the needs of the people, engaging in effectively sort of vanity projects for their own careers, as opposed to thinking about what is right for the nation and for all of these individuals. So, as you say, we're struggling with cost of living. We can barely afford to fill the tanks of our cars. We can barely afford to pay our electricity bills. So this is effectively what the country does not need right now, is this sort of disruption.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what the motives of the individuals who have resigned happen to be. But what I do know is that we are in the middle of a huge crisis in the UK and outside the UK. The Prime Minister has come back from a week where he met with Commonwealth leaders, he met with NATO, he met with the G7. He is certainly respected on the world stage. And if, as a result of some of the bad decisions he has made here in the United Kingdom, his image has been tarnished, that's still no reason, as I see it, for having the kind of and creating the kind of crisis that we're now facing, and leaving the country perhaps for the next 3 months with no effective government until a new leader is chosen. If indeed that is the way the Conservative Party decide to go, I hope that most of them will have enough sense to recognise that while their leader may not be a perfect person, I guess that whoever they would get in his place will be just as imperfect in maybe in other ways. So I hope that sense will prevail, and that we'll see Westminster concentrating on the kinds of issues which I get in my post bag every week. I've got to say, and I suppose Northern Ireland's a bit detached from this because we don't have Conservative representatives in Northern Ireland. The Conservative Party really don't put forward candidates in Northern Ireland. But I know from my post bag, there's nobody jumping up and down when I defend Boris Johnson, despite what he has done in Northern Ireland. There's nobody jumping up and down saying, oh, your priority should be to get rid of this man. What they want to know is, what are you going to do about the price that we pay for fuel? What are you going to do about the difficulty that we're having now in meeting our household bills? And also, are you going to deal with the huge international problems that we all face?
OK, all right, thank you so much there, Sammy Wilson, DUP MP and Chief Whip. That first hour has gone incredibly quickly. Keep all your thoughts coming into us on email, gbviews@gbnews.uk. We haven't got to any of them in the first hour. I promise you we will try very hard in the second hour, but plenty of your views after the break.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We're trying to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Good morning. This is To The Point on GB News with me, Bev Turner, and Mercy Moroki on your TV, radio and online. We're with you until midday with a show jam-packed with all of today's biggest stories. There's only one, really. Lots of discussion, guests, opinions, as well as yours.
Yes, so make sure you get in touch with those opinions. Our email is gbviews@gbnews.uk. We will, I promise, get to some of your views. We haven't had a chance yet, but it's been very busy, as you can imagine. But first, here's your latest headlines with Rosie.
A very good morning to you. It's 11 o'clock. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date on GB News. Now, there have been further resignations from Boris Johnson's government this morning after two senior cabinet members quit last night. A number of ministers have left their jobs this morning, including the Schools Minister, Robin Walker, and the Children's Minister, Will Quince. Last night, Mr Johnson quickly appointed Nadhim Zahawi as Chancellor and Steve Barclay as Health Secretary to replace both Rishi Sunak and Sajid Javid after they resigned within minutes of each other. Speaking this morning, Mr Zahawi, the new Chancellor, said he believes the Prime Minister has integrity. Labour MP Steve Reid told GB News the country deserves better.
They're too focused on covering up for Boris Johnson's lies and law-breaking to deal with the things that matter to the British people. And that is why we're saying this country desperately needs new leadership. And the rumours at Westminster, circulating in the Tory end of the tea rooms, is that the Prime Minister, to save his own skin, if he feels he's going to be deposed, may call the snap general election. Well, that will then put the ball in the court of the British people.
Well, this morning there have been further calls for the Prime Minister to resign, with some Conservative MPs saying it's a matter of when, not if, Mr Johnson is forced out of number 10. Writing in The Telegraph, the former Brexit Minister Lord Frost called on the Prime Minister to quit before he takes the Conservative Party and the government down with him. Meanwhile, Alex Chalk, who resigned as Solicitor General last night, said the government's duty cannot extend to defending the indefensible. But Lord Moylan, a former advisor to Mr Johnson, says the Prime Minister's in a better position than he was yesterday.
There's no sense at all in Boris actually voluntarily resigning. And actually, I think the Cabinet is stronger this morning than it was yesterday morning, because we've seen two politicians go who basically at the end of their political lives. I mean, they don't really have a future. Rishi could have, but he doesn't really want it, I think.
Well, we haven't heard today from Boris Johnson, but he is expected in the Commons for Prime Minister's questions at 12 o'clock, so in just under an hour's time. Of course, we'll bring that to you here on GB News. Let's turn our attention to other news now. A joint police operation across 5 countries has targeted an organised crime network accused of smuggling up to 10,000 people into the UK on small boats. We can find out more. Our Home and Security Editor, Mark White, joins us now. Mark, how significant a blow is this to illegal immigration, people smuggling across the Channel?
Well, there's no doubt this is a very significant blow to those involved in people smuggling. This particular network, according to officials from the National Crime Agency and their partner agencies across Europe, including Europol, was responsible, they claim, for the smuggling of some 10,000 people across the English Channel in small boats in recent months. Now, there were a number of arrests that took place in London. That was coordinated by the National Crime Agency. 6 people taken into custody in the UK. Now, in addition to this, we had raids and arrests that took place across Europe, in France, in Germany, in the Netherlands and in Belgium. 50 separate locations that were raided and searched. In total, 39 people have been taken into custody, and among them, we're told, 3 high-value targets. In addition to that, of course, they have also recovered, they say, significant quantities of materials that were used in the smuggling operation, including some 1,200 life jackets, 150 small boats, 50 outboard motors, all now seized by authorities as they continue their investigation. It followed the arrest earlier this year of a man described as a kingpin, and an Iranian national who was living in the UK. We've been hearing from Chris Farmond, who is from the National Crime Agency, about the significance of this network and exactly what he believes they were up to.
This group was responsible for sourcing small boats. And when I say small boats, actually they're getting bigger. They can take between 50 and 60 people. They were sourcing them from Turkey, bringing them forward and storing them in Germany in warehouse-type facilities. And then they were calling them forward to France through Belgium or the Netherlands in order to supply the traffickers on the beach, who would then load them in the boats and send them off in the direction of the UK.
I think there is no doubt that this will have an impact on the numbers coming across the Channel in the short term, at least, because the supply of many of the boats that they use has been significantly disrupted. However, going forward, it's a very lucrative business. There are other criminal networks waiting in the wings to take up what is a business worth many millions of pounds each week.
Mark, thank you very much, our Home and Security Editor. Now, more than 2 million low-income workers will benefit from changes to national insurance that's come into effect today. The threshold has been raised. That means that workers can now earn up to £12,500 before contributing. It's up from the previous threshold of around £10,000. Well, it follows an increase in national insurance earlier this year, which the government say will help pay for health and social care. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's head back to the point.
Good morning. This is To The Point on GB News with me, Mercy Moroki, and Bev Turner on your TV, radio and online. Now, usually on Wednesdays, we ask you what stories you want to see covered. Usually it's our viewer-dedicated show, but there's only really one story on the menu today. That's, of course, Boris Johnson and his cabinet, some members of his cabinet quitting. So how are we going to cover it?
So do not worry if you've missed any of the action. We're going to have all the details of government resignations and who's been appointed where and when with our political correspondent Tom Harwood. Plus an insider's reaction with Tory MP Peter Bone. He's backed Boris before. Will he do it again?
Yes, then for the Labour reaction, we'll cross over to Labour MP John Speller as the investigation into Sir Keir Starmer's Beergate scandal continues. Is it a bit too soon to be gloating over Boris's future as Prime Minister?
And finally, it is still, to some extent, your show today. So we will be asking one of you for your thoughts. 2 GB viewers will tell us what they think about all this mess a little later.
Live on air. We're going to be speaking to them down the line, so that should be really exciting. That's all coming up and much more across the programme. We're here for another about 40 minutes, and you can get in touch with your views. gbviews@gbnews.uk. We'll go to them shortly.
So unless you've been living under a stone, you will know that last night Prime Minister Boris Johnson lost 2 of his senior cabinet members within 10 minutes of each other as both Chancellor Rishi Sunak and Health Secretary Sajid Javid handed in their resignations.
Yes, well, these resignations come after the Prime Minister was forced to admit he was aware of sexual harassment complaints lodged against his former Deputy Chief Whip, Chris Pincher, who resigned on Thursday after allegations he groped 2 men at a London club. Well, several junior ministers and government aides have also now resigned over the issue.
But Boris Johnson, as he does, appears to be hanging on. He's already appointed Nadhim Zahawi to Chancellor, Steve Barclay to Health Secretary and Michelle Donnellan to Education Secretary.
Yes, well, here's the full list of ministers who have resigned so far. So the big ones, Cabinet Minister Rishi Sunak, who, of course, was the Chancellor, Sajid Javid, who was the Health Secretary, ministers, more junior ministers. For school standards, we've got Will Quinns, who resigned, I believe, this morning, Alex Chalk, Solicitor General, Robin Walker, Schools Minister, and also in the past few minutes, another government minister, John Glenn, has also handed in his resignation. So lots of resignations there. I think it's 14 in total so far, but surely not the last ones we will see.
We've got Lord Jonathan Marland here. He's trying to tell me a bit of gossip off camera, but we will come to him in just a moment because he knows everything. His phone is pinging with text. He can't reveal what they say, of course, but he definitely is the man with his finger on the pulse of what's happening. Another one who is Conservative MP Peter Bone, who joins us now. Good morning, Peter. Thank you so much for joining us. You've been a vocal supporter of Boris Johnson in the past. Is that still the case this morning?
Oh, yes, I absolutely support the Prime Minister. And I think he's doing a good job. And it's great to be here on College Green, but with aeroplanes flying overhead and Westminster Abbey having the bells ringing, it's quite noisy down here. So, but I have absolute support for the Prime Minister. I think he's doing a great job.
You loud and clear, so don't worry too much about that. Will you first of all tell me what your take is on the motives of the 2 cabinet members who resigned last night quite dramatically? Very few people saw that coming. And why now, Peter?
Well, I don't know why now. I do know that it was coordinated because people have said that they knew the resignations were coming. But the question I suppose I would put to both those ex-cabinet ministers was, in the last 2.5 years, Boris has got Brexit done, his first COVID vaccination, which has helped billions of people across the world, lowest unemployment for 50 years. We're stopping the illegal migration of people from Europe. He's led Europe's response to the terrible, terrible war in Ukraine. And today we have the largest tax cut in decades. I'd ask those 2 gentlemen to resign. Which bit of those Conservative policies did you disagree with? How would you have handled it differently? And I don't think there's a single person in the Conservative Party who would have got all those things done so successfully. And that's in the first 2.5 years of his premiership. So another 2.5 years, we should be sailing high. So I do think that the reasons for resignations are not clear to me. They're certainly not policy decisions as far as I can see. So I'm not sure why they've gone.
Jacob Rees-Mogg has said, it was of course the Minister for Brexit Opportunities, has said that, quote, the Prime Minister has won a mandate from the British people and that is more powerful than cabinet members resigning. That's obviously something you agree with based on what you just said. However, isn't it the case that actually the Conservative Party won a mandate from the British people? It wasn't Boris Johnson on the ballot paper, and if the Conservative Party don't think he's delivering for them, then surely it's right that they get rid of him.
Well, first of all, I do think Boris had a huge part of our success. We had a huge majority, our biggest majority since Mrs Thatcher, and that was down largely to his personality. And in fact, he got people in the north and the south and the west and the east all to vote Conservative. I mean, he built a huge coalition. And I do agree with Jacob that we shouldn't remove Prime Ministers It should be the British people decide who they want to lead the country. And I remember the last time this happened was Mrs Thatcher, wasn't it? And they forced Mrs Thatcher out, and my goodness, didn't the country regret that, and the Conservative Party for years afterwards. So I do think that we should carry on in government, deliver a Conservative policy, and let the electors in due course decide whether they want Boris and the Conservatives or Keir Starmer and Labour.
Peter, just one last question before you go. I don't think the British public take kindly, actually, to leaders who they have elected resigning under immense pressure from their governments. How do you think this will play out for the rest of the day with the fact that the British public do still believe we live in a democracy and they would like to have a say in these sorts of huge decisions?
Yeah. Oh, I agree with that. I mean, I expect there'll be a few more ministers to resign. Remember, I think there are about 130 people in government, and so far a handful have resigned. But I do think we've got an excellent new Chancellor who believes in cutting taxes, and that's for the benefit of the country. And I know Steve Barclay will be a really successful Health Secretary. So actually, you could argue that these circumstances, actually the government's been strengthened.
Not heard that taken up this morning, Peter, so...
It's quite the take.
Thank you so much, Conservative MP Peter Bone there, who's no doubt going to have quite a busy day doing all these sorts of interviews.
Yes, indeed. Well, let's go back to our guest who's been kindly in the studio with us since the top of the show, Lord Marland. What do you...
Kindly? It's very kind of you to have me in the studio.
Well, it's a pleasure, it's a pleasure. What do you make of what's been said there? He's essentially alluding to the fact that this is Boris Johnson's win for the party. This, if they get rid of him, essentially, it's almost undemocratic. That's what he's alluding to.
Well, I think he's right, broadly. As I've been saying throughout the show, you know, it is very important the Conservative Party keep together rather than showing they're divided, because they won't be elected. I'm sorry to see John Glenn has resigned. He's my local MP. He's a very good man. I know he's close to Rishi and indeed Sajid. And he'll have his reasons, which he'll probably tell me on Sunday because he's coming for lunch. But
well, his reasons... Speculate, Jonathan. Have a go. I'm guessing his reasons is if he's been on the phone to these two jokers, then, like you say, you know, they're plotting behind the scenes as to what happens next. Well,
I don't want to prejudge what John has to say. He's a man of great integrity, and I like him very much. It's a great loss to the government because he's been doing a very good job. But you know. I'll reserve judgment.
Well, maybe thank you there, Lord Marland, maybe our political correspondent, Tom Harwood, who is actually outside Downing Street as we speak, can give us more information on that. Tom, of course, another resignation, not very surprising, is it?
Not particularly surprising, I suppose, because when you're looking at the Treasury team there, it was a quite close-knit operation. If Rishi leaves, John Glenn leaving perhaps isn't the biggest surprise in the world. And of course, Nadeem Zwahi will be wanting to bring in some people who perhaps he works with as well. However, looking at what other people are saying, it's not just the resignations we need to keep an eye on today. It's what people who don't perhaps hold positions in government are saying. What perhaps previously loyal people are saying. Jonathan Gullis, for example, yesterday resigning as a PPS, saying that he can't support the Prime Minister anymore. A red wall Tory, a very loyal Tory previously, one of the most bullish supporters of the Prime Minister. Similarly, just this morning, Lee Anderson, the consummate red wall Tory, previously a strong supporter of Boris Johnson, saying the road is up for the Prime Minister. And in just the last couple of minutes, Tom Hunt, the MP for Ipswich, previously a loyal supporter of Boris Johnson, now saying he has submitted a letter of no confidence to the chairman of the 1922 committee, Sir Graham Brady. Of course, that letter won't do anything. It can't do anything. Indeed, even if the threshold is met, those letters will not count for a year, because the Prime Minister, of course, had that no-confidence vote against him, which he survived just a month or so ago. That gives him a grace period of a year. Now, the big question is, at what point might those letters start to matter again? Well, that's if the rules are changed. The executive of the 1922 committee can change those rules with a simple majority vote. And when might they do that? There's speculation that that might happen tonight, although I've been warned against that by several MPs who say because we're we're in the midst of an election for the executive of the 1922 committee, it may be seen as improper to do that before the new executive is elected. When the new executive elected? Well, that's next Wednesday. So potentially that is a crunch point when those rules can be changed and when a new confidence vote can be lodged in the Prime Minister, potentially next Wednesday.
Tom Harwood there outside Downing Street. Lord Marland, is that likely, do you think?
Well, I think it's shocking if you change the rules of engagement just to suit your own party. It'll do them a tremendous amount of damage in the eyes of the public if they change their rules. The rules are the rules. I hope Sir Graham Brady doesn't allow that to happen. There'll be other ways of putting pressure on the Prime Minister. It's always the men in grey suits in the end that get him. And there may come a point where the men in grey suits do come and visit him.
Do you think at the moment they're going for him? At the moment, today? Because this has all happened very quickly.
I think people are going to sit and watch, see what happens over the next few days. And, of course, the Prime Minister will watch over the next few days. I mean, let's be fair. Yeah, he wants to be Prime Minister, but he doesn't want to have this constant battle on his hands, does he? I mean, no one would want this awful behaviour going on whilst you're trying to lead the country, would you?
Well, shouldn't he want to be there now, though, when the British public need somebody leading him? I mean, you made the Man United analogy earlier. You know, we need an Alex Ferguson, don't we, Lord Marland? We need somebody who's going to make the tough decisions. It doesn't matter if he's unpopular. We need somebody that's going to look at the tax situation at the moment, the fuel costs, look at the levies on fuel, the things that are actually affecting real people. Shouldn't Boris Johnson today say, you can all fight amongst yourselves, but I've got a job to do?
Yeah, and I think that's what keeps him going, is that he had this overwhelming majority. You know, the press were very quick to applaud him for it, achieving the victory. Of course, it wasn't just him. It was also the fact that people didn't want Jeremy Corbyn, which will stand at the next election. But I think Peter Bone was right. I mean, the public will vote. Ripping the Conservative apart will not benefit the public's opinion of us.
Can I ask you, what globally, obviously, we're at a time of incredible flux and disruption and lack of stability, it feels. Every country around the world seems to be dealing with something huge post-pandemic. Yeah. Rishi Sunak and Sajid Javid, particularly Rishi Sunak, for me are global residents. Rishi Sunak's wife is nom-dom, so his family effectively have to vow that at some point they won't live here. Do you think there are more strings being pulled on a global scale at the moment than is going on domestically in this country? I think
you could, if you were a conspiracy theorist, think there's a lot of destabilising going on by some source. I mean, you look at the sort of unprecedented attack on the Prince of Wales that's happened over the weekend and over various things. For a man who just does nothing but for the benefit of the public and not for himself. And then you see the sort of continuous attack on Boris and this sort of... and the BBC are as much to blame for anybody. They're just relentless in their attack. And you could, if you were a conspiracy theorist, think someone is feeding from outside into this. I don't know. But certainly we need to be very careful. Boris, having been with him in Rwanda, as I said earlier in the programme, is like a rock star. Other leaders love him. He's shown real leadership in Ukraine. Held another company together where Germany and France in particular have played, very tricky roles.
Yeah, it's a delicate balance, isn't it? Because I've always said he's quite impressive on the world stage, actually, when he's dealing diplomatically with other nations. But here at home, he does seem to struggle much more. Well, Lord Marland, thank you.
I agree with you, Mercy. And the only final thing I would say on that, the same was with Thatcher. Yeah. She was very strong on the world stage. We're in a world where we don't have many good world leaders. And so, well done, Boris, for creating that role for himself.
Yes, indeed. Well, we will go to views very shortly, but before we do, Anthony said he'd appoint me as Minister for Justice and Bev as Chief Whip. I'm offended I'm not getting Secretary of State for Justice. I'm just a mere minister. But anyway, thank you, Anthony. After the break, we asked Labour MP John Speller how the opposition is reacting to this mess. Well, could it be a sign of what's to come if Keir Starmer is handed a fixed penalty notice over Beergate? That's after this weather.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital.
Absolutely absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Join me, Darren Grimes, for Real Britain every Saturday and Sunday from 2 p.m. A news hour that comes with a trigger warning. Scorching hot opinion with prominent guests saying the unsayable and a little bit of weekend fun thrown in. Unlike other broadcasters, I won't be forgetting what the B in our name stands for. So howie in for Real Britain Saturday and Sunday from 2 p.m.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
Good morning, it is 11:25. This is To The Point with Bev Turner and Mercy Moroki on GB News. We're live on your TV, online and radio this morning.
Yes, well, what a day it's been, what a show it's been as well. We've already heard Sir Keir Starmer say that Boris Johnson's loss of now 14 ministers is a sign his government is collapsing, with the leader of the opposition once again calling for the Prime Minister to resign. No surprises there.
No, that's right. But the Minister for Brexit Opportunities, Jacob Rees-Mogg, says there's no need whatsoever.
Well, speaking yesterday, Rees-Mogg said, quote, the Prime Minister won a mandate from the British people, and that is more powerful than cabinet ministers resigning.
But what do voters think? Well, here to give us some insight is Anna Riley, our Yorkshire and Humber reporter, who is in the former Chancellor Rishi Sunak's constituency in Richmond, North Yorkshire. Anna, good morning. What's the reaction been up there?
Good morning. Yes, there's been a real mixed reaction here to Rishi Sunak standing down as Chancellor. He's their MP here in Richmond. When he resigned, he said, I recognise this may be my last ministerial job, but I believe these standards are worth fighting for, and this is why I am resigning. That was in response to the Chris Pincher row and Boris Johnson's handling of it. Speaking to people here on the street, some have said that they fully support what Rishi Sunak has done. They've said that they believe he is a man of integrity and that they back him standing down as Chancellor. And others are quite disappointed, though. They've told me that, you know, we're in the midst of a cost of living crisis at the moment, and was this really the right time for Rishi Sunak to stand down? So there's been mixed opinion. Other people are telling me, you know, is it eroding democracy as well with him standing down as Chancellor? It's certainly one thing, though, if Rishi Sunak is saying that this may be his last ministerial job. His constituents around here may be seeing a lot more of him now.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you, Anna. Anna Riley, our Yorkshire and Humber reporter there in former Chancellor Rishi Sunak's constituency in Richmond, North Yorkshire.
Well, you do wonder sometimes how you can have a job such as Chancellor or even Prime Minister and still be able to properly do your constituency work. So, you know, it might not be too bad for the people of Richmond there if they're going to see more of their MP.
Do they want to see more of him? I'm not sure I'd want to see more of him if he was my MP right now, to be completely honest. Right, back to our main story. Prime Minister Boris Johnson is witnessing a mass exodus of some of his most senior staff. As you know, as minister after minister has tendered their resignation. It began with cabinet members Sajid Javid and Rishi Sunak resigning last night, and it seems to still be continuing with junior ministers such as Laura Trott quitting just hours ago.
Yes, well, Sir Keir Starmer said it was about time these ministers resigned from Boris's collapsing government.
After all the sleaze and all the failure, it's clear that this Tory government is now collapsing. And Tory cabinet ministers have been cheerleaders for Johnson throughout this sorry saga. They backed him when he broke the law. They backed him when he lied. They backed him when he mocked the sacrifices of the British people. So they have been complicit as he has disgraced his office and let down his country. And frankly, if they had a shred of integrity, they would have gone months ago.
That's why the timing of this doesn't make any sense to me, because if it was just about that, they would have gone months ago. Anyway, but with investigations ongoing into whether Sir Keir Starmer broke lockdown rules, investigations he said he will resign over. If they found that he had, is it too early for him to start gloating?
Yes, well, John Speller is the Labour MP for Worley and kindly joins us now to give us the Labour reaction. John, what did you think when you yesterday saw that the Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, and the Health Secretary, Sajid Javid, had resigned within 10 minutes of each other?
Well, I thought this was almost inevitable. There would start to be resignations once Simon MacDonald had given his devastating letter that fundamentally pulled the rug from under Boris Johnson and exposed him absolutely clearly as a serial liar. And there was no escape from that. And frankly, cabinet members at that moment had to make a decision. It's unfortunate that only two of them have, because the crisis lingers on. And one would hope that they would show some backbone and actually bring this to a halt, because it's not just bad for the Conservative Party, it's very bad for the country, and we need to get this country back working again.
Might be good for Labour though, John, right?
Well, I mean, look, obviously a government in disarray like this clearly means that the public look on us more favourably, and I could take some comfort from that. But more importantly, I'm concerned about what's good for the country. And at the moment, this government seems incapable, not just because of these scandals, but seems incapable of actually governing. You know, we've got great delays in getting passports, in getting driving licences at the airports, at the docks, a cost of living crisis. It just goes on and on. And we need actually a competent government. Now, that's either through a general election, which will be the best way of doing it, or, quite frankly, to get in a Prime Minister who isn't just focused on all his scandals, but actually wants to pull his government together so we can pull the country together.
Been asking our viewers, John, for their responses this morning, and there are a lot of people who watch GB News who are big fans of Boris Johnson, actually. For whatever reason, they like him. And a lot of these this morning are saying enough is enough, surprisingly. I was quite surprised to see that, aren't you, Mercy? A lot of people are saying, I had high hopes for Boris. He's made too many mistakes now. It hasn't helped that he's been hounding out since he took office. The left hates him because of Brexit. It reminds me of the way that Trump was hounded out. If you don't fit, you're out, said Karen on email. Do you think there's any truth to that? Because it doesn't feel necessarily as though the two resignations last night were necessarily about... they did criticise Boris, of course they did. That was their main reason for leaving. But I felt like the reasons were quite flimsy. If they'd wanted to go on a moral ticket, they could have done it before now.
Could have done, but maybe they were hoping that there would be change. You might argue that that was mistaken and that he is not capable of changing his character. He has been a serial liar all his life, and maybe they decided enough was enough. What I'm concerned about is that other members of the cabinet, maybe it's because they know that in a new administration their sheer lack of competence would mean that they wouldn't get a job. You know, quite frankly, they seem to have been appointed more for loyalty to Johnson than they do actually, because they're actually up to the job. And you see, I'm not surprised that a number of your viewers are saying enough is enough, because that's interesting enough what's happened with the Daily Telegraph. About 3 weeks ago, they had a full page of letters, and they changed their line. And I asked a journalist, they're responding to their readers.
Yeah, well, lots of people are losing faith in Boris Johnson, but not everybody, it would seem, at the moment. Well, John Spello, it's always great to have you on the show, Labour MP for Worley there. Well, join us after this very short break. We'll be discussing lots more, and more importantly, we're going to be speaking live to one of our viewers and listeners. Actually, I think two of our viewers and listeners, and we'll go to your views. That's after these headlines.
A very good morning. It's 11:34. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date on GB News. Well, it's been a morning of resignations from Boris Johnson's government after two senior cabinet members quit last night. There have been more than a dozen resignations so far, including the Schools Minister, Robin Walker, and the Children's Minister, Will Quince. Last night, Mr Johnson quickly appointed Nadhim Zahawi as Chancellor and Steve Barclay as Health Secretary to replace Rishi Sunak and Sajid Javid after they left their roles within minutes of each other. Liberal Democrat MP Christine Jardine told GB News it's time for the Prime Minister to go.
It's ridiculous it's taken so long. We have a Prime Minister who isn't fit for office. I have seen Conservative grandees, Conservative former ministers agree with that statement. There is a general acceptance that Boris Johnson has let down his party, the people who voted for him, and the country, and it's been just one shambles after another, and it really is time to go.
Well, this morning there have been further calls from within the Conservative Party for the Prime Minister to resign. Writing in The Telegraph, the former Brexit Minister Lord Frost called on him to quit, while Alex Chalk, who resigned as Solicitor General, called for fresh leadership. A number of other MPs, including Robert Halfon and Lee Anderson, publicly have withdrawn their support from Boris Johnson this morning. But Lord Moylan, a former advisor to the Prime Minister, says that Mr Johnson is in a better position than he was yesterday.
There's no sense at all in Boris actually voluntarily resigning. And actually, I think the Cabinet is stronger this morning than it was yesterday morning, because we've seen two politicians go who basically at the end of their political lives. I mean, they don't really have a future. Rishi could have, but he doesn't really want it, I think.
Well, we haven't heard today from Boris Johnson, but he's expected in the Commons for Prime Minister's questions within the next half an hour. Of course, we'll bring that to you here on GB News. Now, some other news. A joint police operation across 5 countries has targeted an organised crime network accused of smuggling up to 10,000 people into the UK on small boats. Around 40 people were arrested in coordinated raids in the UK, Belgium, Germany, France and the Netherlands, including 6 people in London. 135 small boats and more than 1,200 life jackets were also recovered in Germany and the Netherlands. TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.194 and €1.168. The price of gold currently stands at £1,476 and 56 pence per ounce.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for physical investment.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Well, good morning. It's 11:39 and this is To The Point with me, Mercy Moroki and Bev Turner on GB News. We're live on your TV, radio and online.
Now, the latest minister to resign, Victoria Mary Atkins, is a British politician who has served as Minister of State for Prisons and Probation and Minister for Afghan Resettlement since 2021. We've already heard Sir Keir Starmer say that Boris Johnson's loss of now 15 ministers is a sign that his government is collapsing, with the leader of the opposition once again calling for the PM to resign.
Yeah, so that's 15 resignations so far. That's just the latest in a long list of, obviously, it was all triggered by the Chancellor and Health Secretary yesterday around 6 o'clock, roughly it was, 6 in the afternoon. We've had the Minister for School Standards, we've had the Minister for Children and Families, the Solicitor General, lots of PPSs, private parliamentary secretaries, bit of a mouthful. We've had the Vice Chair of the Conservative Party, Bim Afalami. It's a whole range of people. So I think 16 is actually the figure now.
I was going to say, I think it had moved on to 16. And actually, so what happens now? OK, so as we heard before when Lord Marland was here, basically the Tory party are now trying to change the rules so that they can force another vote of no confidence. Because we had that other vote of no confidence quite recently, they can't systemically, what's the word I'm looking for? Legally, customarily, they can't do another one now. I think it's for 12 months.
Procedurally, yeah, but there's their procedures,
the word.
isn't it?
Thank you, Mercy. So if they can do that, if they can change the rules so they can have another no confidence vote, Rebel MPs could win a majority on the committee's 18-strong executive next week. We heard that from Tom earlier. And they would try to hold a new confidence vote in the Prime Minister before Parliament goes on its summer break in the 21st of July. If that confidence vote is held, if more than 50% of Tory MPs vote to get rid of Boris Johnson, then he must resign. OK, that's if they are successful with changing the procedure.
Yeah.
If they don't change it, if they can't change it, then Boris Johnson clings on in there. He secures the backing of his cabinet and the wider party. And then there could be more resignations. If the cabinet quits en masse, then he'd have no choice but to resign. Or he could win back disgruntled cabinet members and the squealing pig will escape once again.
Yeah, it's a big ask, that one, isn't it? And I don't think we had Lord Marland on earlier who supported Boris Johnson in his mayoral campaign. He made the point, I think the public wouldn't look too kindly on the Conservative Party not getting what they want and then sort of changing the rules so they can get what they want. It's not a great look, but look, many of them are prepared to use whatever tools they can to get rid of the Prime Minister, so they might very well do that. OK, joining us now for further analysis is Kevin Schofield, political editor of the Huffington Post UK, and David Maddox, political editor of The Express Online. Hello, gents. I don't know whether you just heard my rather garbled analysis of the steps that might
happen now. But what are your predictions? Kevin, if I can come to you first, what do you think the next steps might look like?
Well, I think things seem to be spinning out of control as far as Boris Johnson is concerned. As you've just been saying, we've had a wave of further resignations this morning, but not just that, we've had MPs going public, previously loyal MPs going public and saying that they no longer support the Prime Minister. So I think what's going to happen is this is going to reach a conclusion quite speedily. Obviously last night we had the 2 cabinet resignations. It looked like Boris Johnson had managed to steady the ship by preventing any further resignations. However, I think it's getting to the point now where someone might have to have a quiet word in Boris Johnson's ear and say, look, it's better if you go now with a bit of honour rather than wait to be dragged out of here kicking and screaming.
Well, David, what's your view on this? Because we were just saying there. It seems. Do we have David and Kevin? Yeah, David. Let me ask you this question. We've been talking there about all the different options that the Conservative Party currently have, and indeed the Prime Minister currently has. Do you think this option of the Backbench Committee electing a sort of anti-Boris clique to the executive, and then basically changing the rules so that they can oust him again, they can hold that confidence vote. Do you think that's a good idea? Is it a good look for the public?
It's probably not a good look, but we've reached the point now where they probably need to do something. They certainly can't wait a year for another leadership election. It seems likely now that most of the Conservative backbenchers are actually against Boris. The resignations are coming thick and fast. I think we're just 2 or 3 cabinet ministers, maybe 4 cabinet ministers away from him actually being forced out per se without a vote. But I think we've got to the point now where it's whether he goes today or next week. But he's toast, whichever way it is.
So do you think that he will go before the summer recess, Kevin? Because I can't help but think Boris Johnson being Boris Johnson, he'll cling on by his fingertips for the next, I think it's about 14 or 15 days until they break for summer. The dust will settle, he'll make his plan, and then he'll come back.
I think that's what he would like to do, but as I was just saying, I think things are now spinning out of control. I think there's no doubt that when this election for the 1922 Committee Executive takes place next week, that there will be an anti-Boris majority elected. Very quickly they will move to change the rules so that he can be challenged again in another confidence vote. I think that would happen before recess, and undoubtedly with the way that people are coming out today, previously loyal, to say that they no longer support him, I think he would lose that vote. So that's why I think it may well be better for him and for those around him to have a quiet word with him and say, look, you're going to lose this vote next week or possibly the week after. It's maybe better for you to resign with a bit of honour.
So David, as the political editor of Express Online, explain to us what would happen then, because if I've got this right, when Tony Blair resigned, he automatically elected Gordon Brown to take over from him. When David Cameron left, he didn't actually leave. He just kind of left them to it, didn't he, to fight amongst himself. He sort of ignored the customary process of doing that. So what would happen under these circumstances now if Boris Johnson resigns?
So just to go back in history, when Tony Blair resigned, he was actually trying to find somebody to stand against Gordon Brown, but Gordon Brown managed to get so many of the MP nominations that there wasn't a contest, and it was just a walk-in for him. And that actually had its own problems and probably contributed to the 2010 election defeat. Yes, you're right about David Cameron. It was an open contest. If Boris goes, or when Boris goes, it will be even more of an open contest. I don't think anybody's really got a strong idea over who will take over. I think one of the MPs, Red Wall MPs, who was talking to me last night, was saying that they would welcome an open debate properly on the future direction of the party, because one of the issues around Boris isn't just Partygate and various scandals, it's actually that so many of them lost confidence on policy areas like his increases of taxes and some of the net zero stuff, and you know, they want to have a debate about that within the parliamentary party and the party as a whole.
OK. Gentlemen, we're going to say goodbye because we're going to go to some GB viewers now. But thank you ever so much for your time. That was Kevin Schofield, political editor of the Huffington Post, and David Maddox, political editor of The Express Online.
Yes, now we are the People's Channel here on GB News. So we're very pleased to give you guys at home an insight into what people think about everything that's going on, straight from our viewers and listeners. We're really pleased to say Bob Lister is joining us from Dorset. Hi, Bob. Thank you so much for coming on. We love having viewers to give their views. What do you make of everything that's happened yesterday, over the last few hours even? We've heard so much today from ministers, from MPs, from commentators and journalists like us, but we want to hear what people at home are thinking.
OK, thank you, Mercy and Bev. They shouldn't change the law, certainly. They should leave the law. They voted for Boris to stay, and so he should stay. There's enough chaos now to replace him. We've got an issue with Starmer. Should he be fined for Durham Gate? But are the police left biased? We don't know. I think Boris made a good choice with Sawawi for Chancellor. He started up YouGov and has a good track record for business. Personally, I would have had Stephen Barclay moved as Home Secretary and probably moved Priti Patel to Health. Stephen Barclay has a very strong message with working with our friends in France and elsewhere, and I think he would have made a very good Home Secretary. I think for Boris to really to survive with the people, which is what it's about, I think he needs to cope with. I mean, he's coped with lots of things over the period. He's coped with Brexit, COVID, Ukraine. He's led the world, the Western world, with defending Ukraine, which is great. But he needs to take off 40p tax off fuel, in my opinion.
Me too, I agree.
Empty at the moment.
Bob, I'm going to have to interrupt you. Your first appearance as political pundit on GB News has been superb. Thank you so much. You did brilliantly.
Yeah, we'll have you back on again, Bob, I'm sure.
I'm sorry we kept it so short. You know what it's like for our journalists and our commentators and our politicians. We try and squeeze them in. Bob, thank you so much. Right, we will be back tomorrow. That's it from me and Mercy. But next, the briefing with Liam Halligan.
Alex Deacon here with your latest weather update. Something a bit hotter on the way for the end of the week. As for the next few days, it's more of the same. So generally, a lot of cloud across parts of the north with some patchy rain today. Whereas further south, under the influence of this high pressure, it's mostly dry and some places seeing some sunshine. These weather fronts, though, have been trickling southwards, fizzling out as they do so, but bringing a lot of cloud over parts of northern England this afternoon. A bit of patchy rain here and there, particularly to the west of the Pennines. Staying fairly damp across the Western Isles, the Highlands of Scotland and the Northern Isles. Fairly windy here too, and some of that rain just trickling south at times through the central belt into southwest Scotland. The odd spot of rain for Northern Ireland, but further south it's mostly dry and fine. The cloud breaking up a little bit. 25, 26 possible across the southeast. Mostly we're in the low 20s in the south, high teens further north. The rain should ease a little bit across the northwest through this evening. We'll see a little bit more clouds spilling southwards and some patchy rain arriving over the Midlands, maybe East Anglia in the southeast towards the end of the night. With a lot of cloud around, temperatures are going to hold up 14, 15 degrees in most towns and cities, a little cooler where we see some cloud breaks further north. But generally quite a grey start to Thursday, apart from a little bit of drizzle at times coming into Northern Ireland and the Western Isles. Most places dry, maybe the odd shower across East Anglia. I think the cloud will tend to break up in most places through the morning, certainly by the afternoon, looking at quite a bit of sunshine across the country. And temperatures responding to that strong sunshine, getting up into the mid-20s once more across the south, mostly in the high teens, low 20s elsewhere. Still a bit more cloud and rain across northernmost parts as we go through Thursday evening. The rain could pep up again over the Highlands, but again, most of the places staying dry and fine. We will have a bit more cloud and patchy rain across the northwest on Friday, but otherwise, again, most places dry. Increasing amounts of sunshine through the weekend and increasing temperatures.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m.